Hello, everyone. Welcome to a press conference with Leader of the NDP, Jagmeet Singh. We're just going to wait for a few seconds to allow everyone to connect. Allô tout le monde, bienvenue à la conférence de presse avec le chef du NPD, Jagmeet Singh. On va juste attendre quelques secondes pour que tout le monde puisse se connecter au webinaire. Ça ne sera pas très long. Richard, you can go ahead.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Penticton, British Columbia, where the smoke is a little better today than it was yesterday, but it's still a real stark reminder of the climate crisis we're in, the extreme heat we've encountered in the last while, the number of fires that have been burning around southern British Columbia. And this is something that the NDP is really focused on in these times. And it's wonderful to have my leader, Jagmeet Singh, here in Penticton, especially considering how Canadians have really embraced Jagmeet as a leader. He's the most popular leader in the country, and I'm so glad that he's here. We had a wonderful event last night. And so without further ado, I'd like to welcome Jagmeet Singh.
Thanks so much, Richard. I'm really honored to have Richard on the team. Richard has been an incredible addition. And the things that people said about Richard yesterday, the fact that he is such a hardworking MP, cares so much about the community. He is someone from Penticton that understands the struggles that people have gone through and cares deeply about the things that people care about here. So amazing to have Richard as a part of our team. And today I want to talk a bit about the struggles that Richard touched on and some of the things that we're seeing. We are faced with a climate crisis that is so real. The air that we breathe right now is filled with smoke. Today is a little bit better than yesterday, but the days have been, the mountains are clouded because there is so much smoke. It's been so incredibly painful, the reality of the climate crisis, how it is impacting us right now. And I want to say to people that we as New Democrats are going to do everything we can to fight this climate crisis like we want to win. And that means creating thousands of good jobs that help us reduce our emissions. And there are so many things that we can do. We can invest in renewable energy. We can invest in electrifying transportation. We can retrofit buildings and homes to reduce our energy usage. There is so much that we can do. We just need to have the courage to take on the big polluters and to invest in the good jobs of the future that help us reduce emissions. And I want folks to know that we are committed to doing that. I also want to do a bit of a recap. This has been a very emotional tour. We spent a lot of time with Indigenous communities for the past 4 or 5 days. Recently, we met with Indigenous leaders in BC. We went to the Kamloops residential school, the former residential school. And that was a really powerful moment to speak with the community, the chief and council, and to witness the discovery, to see where the kids were found. It really drives home how much we have to make this right. We have to fight with everything we have to make things right with Indigenous communities. And that means stopping the legal battles against Indigenous kids. That means making sure we follow all of the calls to actions in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And that means walking the path of reconciliation, not just with words, as Justin Trudeau has done for far too long, but with real concrete action. And so that's why I'm committed to that exactly. We're going to stop the legal battles. We're going to make sure there's clean drinking water and make sure we're fighting for Indigenous people. So this is, it's been a really important time to look at the impacts of climate crisis and justice for Indigenous people. And I'm looking forward to the questions you might have. Donc, je veux premièrement remercier mon député extraordinaire, Richard Cannings, pour le travail qu'il fait ici dans le comté. Hier, on a parlé avec plusieurs personnes qui ont raconté des histoires de comment Richard connaît les enjeux, comment il se bat fort pour les gens. Et ça me rend fier d'avoir un député comme ça. Aussi, je veux dire que dans cette tournée, on a aujourd'hui, en Colombie-Britannique, on est frappé fort par les feux de forêt. Le feu de forêt causé par la crise climatique. C'est vraiment un enjeu qui touche tout le monde et nous touche maintenant. Donc, on doit s'attaquer à la crise climatique avec toutes nos ressources. Ça va créer une opportunité de créer des emplois de qualité qui réduisent nos émissions et je veux continuer cette bataille comme on veut la gagner. Deuxièmement, dans cette tournée, on a parlé avec plusieurs communautés autochtones, parlé de l'impact des pensionnats, le trauma entre les générations. Et j'ai aussi eu la chance, l'honneur de visiter la communauté à Kamloops et les communautés autochtones où les pensionnats où on a trouvé les 215 enfants. Et ça m'a encore frappé fort comment on doit régler l'injustice et prendre les gestes concrets pour vraiment marcher dans la direction de la réconciliation. Donc, c'est mon engagement. Encore merci, je suis prêt pour vos questions. Thank you so much, and I'm ready for any questions you might have.
We'll start with questions on location, so you can go ahead.
So there's a lot of opportunities when we think about this horrible crisis that we're up against. It's going to take thousands and thousands of workers to tackle this climate crisis. So some of the things that we can do, we can invest in retrofitting buildings. So every building in the city, in BC in general, we know with the increasing temperatures, communities are not ready and prepared for the new realities of the climate crisis. If we invest in retrofitting these buildings, it will create jobs locally, and it will reduce the emissions. It will reduce the energy that these buildings consume to heat and to cool them. That's a job creator. We know that there's opportunities to invest in renewable energy. We can make investments to encourage and support renewable energy infrastructure, also creating jobs. We know that there's resource sector workers that want jobs right now, and there's ways to remediate things like the abandoned oil wells and convert some of those into geothermal energy plants. All of these are ways for us to create jobs. And we have to make sure that we're building the products of the future here in Canada. We know that the electrification of transportation is happening, and we need to invest in that. So building the cars of the future, building renewable energy, and building the electric batteries and the cars that will help us build that brighter future. Cars that don't make as much noise as what we just heard. Cars that are clean and don't require emissions and don't require energy from fossil fuels. And so those are some things we can do. It's feasible, and the energy sector workers want a good job. They know that the global markets are headed in a direction where there will be less and less demand for fossil fuels. Major car manufacturers have announced that they're going to stop the production of combustion engines. Many countries have announced that they are no longer going to allow the sale of internal combustion engines. So we know that there's a direction the world is headed. Energy sector workers want to know they've got a good job. And so what we can do is immediately invest in creating those jobs. There is no fight against the climate crisis unless we create good jobs for workers. And that's what really sets New Democrats apart. We believe in taking on the big polluters, creating those good jobs, and taking on the climate crisis.
Next question.
I really appreciate the question. Richard has talked a lot about the housing crisis here in Penticton and in the surrounding areas. It's a crisis, and it was a crisis before the pandemic. It's only gotten worse throughout the pandemic. People cannot find a home that's in their budget. People cannot find housing. You can't find a place to rent that you can afford or to buy that you can afford. And we need to make sure we tackle this crisis. And as you said, the federal government's been out of dealing with this crisis for decades. The federal government hasn't really taken a strong stance in investing in housing for years and years. So what we need to do is take on this crisis with seriousness. It's also a job creator. We need to invest in affordable homes for all income ranges, for the homeless, for low income, for people with good jobs. Everyone is in this crisis in a different way. We've got to make sure we invest in the housing that people need. Yes, unequivocally, it's been a part of our platform. It's been a part of our previous campaigns. And we believe strongly in really giving back power to people. For too long, what we've seen is with a false majority, or not even a majority, the governments form a majority without having a majority of votes or majority of seats. or a majority of votes. And that's a big problem. People don't feel like their votes count. They don't feel like their voice is counting. And I really want to build an electoral system that reflects the will of people. If people vote a certain way, their voice should be heard. It's something that would give power to people, and it would take away the fear that a party could earn far less than the majority of votes and end up forming a government, which we've seen happen countless times in our history.
So we'll come back to Zoom to see if there's any questions online. If you have a question, please use the raise hand function to ask your question and follow up. J'aimerais ça inviter les membres des médias. Si vous avez une question de suivi, veuillez utiliser la fonction lever la main pour poser votre question. There are no questions online. Il n'y a pas de questions en ligne. Back to you.
We're going to go to the questions on the floor. We'll do one more and one more follow-up if you'd like.
Well, I think that it would make sense that the Governor General doesn't request or doesn't grant that request. What we know the laws are, we have an election every 4 years. And the exception to that is if the current government loses confidence of the House. Well, they haven't. They've been able to pass all confidence motions and pass the budget. And we're in a pandemic. We're coming into a recovery. We should be focused on getting people the help they need, helping small businesses like the ones we're going to tour shortly. We should be focused on fighting the climate crisis. We should be focused on improving our healthcare. That should be our priority right now, not going to an election. If there is an election called, we'll be ready. We're more than ready to fight one. I don't think it's the right thing to do. And that's why if the Governor General decides not to dissolve Parliament, we'll continue fighting. We'll continue to go back to Ottawa in September and pass legislation that helps people. That's awesome. I love the question because I just got a brand new longboard, Canadian made, land yachts. Shout out to Canadian companies. It's also made in Canada. And yeah, enjoy it. I've been riding it. So definitely will ride it some more. I didn't bring it with me on this trip though, but I ride it a lot. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks, man. Well done.